Yes, thank you. I think the issue of Palestine and Israel is it's been there from the time we were born, and many of us, it's nothing new. It's always been the same issue. And if there's one issue that the world has really ignored, for decades, it's this issue of the Palestinian question. So it's not about really a Muslim issue only, but there was a time when, in fact, the whole of Africa was in support of the issue of the Palestinian. You remember, a few years ago. It's only recently that a few countries have started putting because of pressure from the US. But the question has been that Palestinians, I don't want to go into a lot of history of how Israel came up in 1948, and everybody knows those things. But I think the question of, allowing these people to have their own country, their own state, and their own freedoms is about freedoms, really. So to us, to the Muslim community, what the Palestinians are doing is to fight for freedom. And Hamas and all these are people who have resistance movements who have been fighting for the freedom of the same way Mao, the same way ANC in South Africa, and all other countries have gone through this. And we've all been called the same thing. You're terrorists when you're fighting for those rights. And later you'll find again that the same people will be forming governments and they'll be told they're not terrorists. This is how Mandela, when he now formed the government, he had to be, before he could fly to the US, they had to remove him first from that list of terrorists. So I think our position is, as Muslim leaders at the time, when we gave that statement last week, is that I think what is happening in Gaza today is really not acceptable in today's age, when people can see live, people being bombed into, completely destroyed infrastructure, buildings, children, women, on grounds that there were people who had attacked Israel. And so to victimize the entire nation and destroy them, and today as we speak, for the 11th day, no food going in, no water. These are all, in terms of international law, everybody can see what's going on. So so those of us who think that the Americans, particularly, and Western countries, siding with Israel, not because Israel is right in what is happening, but because of that guilt that they have, what they did to the Jews in the past. And from the time they created that state for Israel, it's been apologetic to, so they allowed Israel to do whatever they want because of the guilt that they've done. But in the process, they're creating more crises. And I think that's why many of us think that this situation is likely to take the world into a dangerous direction, and it will. I can tell you for a fact, it's not going to end very. You see what happened the other day, yesterday, when the president of US went to that area. The Arab countries snapped him. They refused to meet him. And it's the first time in the history of the US president that Arab countries have refused to meet a visiting US president because of what is happening. And people can see the pain. The rest of the world is seeing what is happening, but the Western countries are saying no. Israel has the right to defend itself, but everyone else should also have the right to defend themselves. But so our position is that I think there is what the West is doing is not right. You cannot only look at the interest of Israel and disregard the interest of Palestinians. Palestinians are also human beings. They're entitled to their rights. They're entitled to their freedoms. And so this is the position on which, and we criticize also our government, Kenya, which has a tradition of always standing with the West on whatever, when it comes to this kind of matters. They stood with the West on apartheid in South Africa. They are standing with them. So we are actually very supportive of what countries like South Africa have done. They've come out very clearly in support of the Palestinians. African Union President, Chairman, gave a statement on behalf of the African Union in support of the Palestinian issue. Palestine is a state with an embassy in Kenya, and with an embassy in many countries, with representation in African Union, in UN. So and when they exercise this right to defend themselves, they're doing so as a state. So I think the larger picture is that yes, will there be an impact? Yes, there will be an impact economically, because what is happening already is those of us who are importing, the business where I am, the prices of the raw materials we're importing have already shot up in the last 1 week by almost 5%, 6%, 7%. Petroleum will obviously, the situation it's gone up. So the economies of the world, if this thing goes on, And the other international players are trying to, you see how the Russians are talking, and the Chinese and Iran and Americans are sending warships. And so then the situation is likely to get worse. And if it does, then obviously then the economy of many of us will pay a price. In fact,
so I'm just also reading that members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation are saying they should impose an oil embargo and other sanctions on Israel and expel all Israeli ambassadors over a deadly strike on Al-Ali Arab Hospital. I think that was very inhumane in Gaza, according to Iranian Foreign Minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian. And I was just reading also how the Islamic the Organization of Islamic Cooperation met and has finalized preparations for an open-ended emergency extraordinary meeting on the OIC Executive Committee at the ministerial level to discuss the aggression against Gaza Strip and deteriorating humanitarian situation. And if we're having these organizations meeting together and they come up with some sanctions,
it's unlikely that they will expel Israeli embassies or take any action. These countries are countries which are allies of the America and Europe. It's very unlikely that any of those Arab countries will take any action. Look at Egypt. The only access Gaza has is the border with Egypt. But Egyptian government cannot stand up and say, these people are dying. Let us get this food in. They fear the Americans. So those countries are all puppets of the West. You know them. They are not going to do anything that would jeopardize the interest of never mind their posturing, not meeting Biden or whatever. But I don't think there will be any action like what they're proposing there that would happen anytime soon. They would rather close their eyes and say, let this thing, but they won't. They're not likely. The only countries who might, do something, probably countries like Iran, but through Lebanon maybe. But otherwise, I don't think people expect much from those Arab countries neighboring there, the Jordan and Egypt. These are people who are on payroll of the US. They're the ones who are funded. After they signed the Dayton Peace Accord, you remember, Egypt is getting $2 billion annually for their military. And Jordan is also getting money, so they won't.
Al-Sisi has come forward saying that, of course, they will not really open borders for the Palestinians because they fear also this war will actually come close to your borders. There's the bugbears and fears regarding also the influx of refugees. Then how do we handle it? I think
that's the whole plan of
the King of Jordan has
spoken
spoken
the 2 million out of Gaza into Egypt and forget about that. That's the whole plan. And this is why Sisi doesn't want to open the border, because if he gets 2 million, then his own country gets into crisis. But you see, the sad thing is Gaza is not a country in the sense with an army, with police, with jets, with tanks or anything. These are just people. Every weapon that they use there is manufactured in that. They make it themselves. So, but this is another country. Israel is a country that has supposed to have the strongest army in the world. You are bombing day and night. You have jets. You have military. Like now, if they go in by land, I mean, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of people who probably will die in that war. But anyway, I think the Arab countries have never come to such a test. In the past, media was not available. Now they're seeing live, and their population, the pressure coming from the ground in the Arab countries is going to be so much that some might have to take some action sooner or later. Otherwise, it will be difficult even for them.
Yeah. All right. It's interesting how within a week or so, we stopped hearing about war in Ukraine. We stopped hearing about war in Sudan. We don't even remember there's an earthquake in Afghanistan.
Correct.
All focus
is by that.
Yes, all focus on Israel. And that leaves me wondering, why the double standards? The children in Sudan, the children in Ukraine who are suffering for more are children of this planet. So if we have to be fair, we have to be fair to everybody. If we have to be unfair, we have to be unfair to everybody.
Who told you we are fair?
So this is my argument. So at the end of the day, we can see what is happening in Gaza, what's happening in all those places. And I think even children are asking, why should this be allowed to happen? Why should children in Gaza, children in other countries be dying and they're innocent? And I think it is a time we stood up for the truth. And I don't understand why the issue of Palestine has been there for the last 75 years. Who owns the land where Israel and Palestine call their land? Somebody must have owned that land. So I don't understand why we cannot resolve I know it is complex, but we can resolve it. But is death the best way to resolve that issue?
Indeed.
By killing other
I think
people?
you're right. And if you look at how thing is, just even look at the road at Portland. What is fair? Nothing fair in it. But behind it, I go beyond Muslim versus whatever. It's beyond being Muslim. It's human being. Do we have can we coexist? I think that's the bottom line. But to answer perhaps XN, if you look at you can't divorce Israel from America. You can't. Really, who controls the American economy? Who makes sure that becomes the president of the US? It has so much, all this huge coalition in the States. Why is the incubation center? Had an opportunity to go to this tiny, it's an incubation center for everything you do there. So there's a lot of it at stake. But I think even perhaps Joe Biden, and even he had sent his person going there, it sent the wrong signal. I think, and even condemning that burst, that it was not from the Israelites. That's why, as a reader, and we saw it in when this country said there was a cartoon, Museveni was on the fence of the EU, but the others, their directions were very clear. We said they are.
Yeah, they were sitting on the fence.
Yeah, the others were not. You need to be careful when you're making statements as a reader, and I think US came perhaps in a poor way. The way Israel state was established after the massacre with the Jews, let's also create state for the Palestine. The war is not going to help us out. And then the other thing is, you're really overrunning Gaza. They have all the might, they have all the support. But there's a way to deal with it. It's the same narrative. Russia wanted to overrun Ukraine. We don't sort those things away. But
there is a group of people in the United States who say that this is a false flag operation. Now, a false flag operation was 9/11, Pearl Harbor. I've got some videos here which you can watch to see who really carried out 9/11 and who really, all the indications are that, the Americans knew the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor, but that's another story. But here, you see, what you do is you're ready to sacrifice your own citizens so that you then have an excuse to go and invade the place. Now, an American friend of mine, I don't know whether he's in the CIA or not, he said that the Hamas had actually gone and with drones and put out all the lights and the radio communication, and this is how they were then able to just use a bulldozer, go through the fence and go and even kill a whole lot of sleeping Israeli soldiers. But sometimes, this has happened. Let me just say, this has happened in the West, where people, you carry out what's known as a false flag operation,
right,
and you then use it as an excuse to go and invade Iraq, invade Afghanistan. As you remember, Libya, the Western world, NATO destroyed Libya because they had, Gaddafi said, okay, we're going to trade in the gold dinar, not in the dollar. Hey, NATO, India. So this, I tell you, the Western, and the problem is, you were mentioning Putin has looked like a bad man there. Putin is my hero. Why? Because he came into power in 1999 in Russia. All these oligarchs were there making money together with the Americans, and he said, look, this looting of Russia has got to stop. The oligarchs ran to New York, to London, and to Dubai.
Dubai, yeah.
Okay? And he then said, okay, now we're going to build the country. And NATO, they had promised we won't go any closer to Russia. They took over Poland. There are American nuclear warheads in Poland. If we found that, let's say the Somalis, if we found that they said we're going to put our army at the border of Kenya, You think we would just simply say, oh, border, okay.
Yeah. As long as you're on your side, we
Yeah.
don't care.
But, now they want to make Ukraine part of NATO. And in fact, it was going to be negotiated. And this fellow, Boris Johnson? That fellow, Biden tells him, you go and tell Zelensky, go and tell him that we will support him and continue fighting. And, and there's an American fellow who says, this war in Ukraine is fantastic. It's only 5% of our budget. The budget in the United States is $800 billion. Their budget, now, when you're spending this amount of money on just, nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, what's the purpose if we don't have someone to fight? Invent someone to fight. So anyway, then what happened was that Biden, Boris Johnson said, we will continue to support you. And Zelensky, some of the weapons that are being used in Israel and so on now came from Ukraine.
But I think the bottom line is racing, and I think this is what fundamental team. And you're right, there's a story in town that this could have been deliberate, because the kind of intelligence you have there, how did they miss it on the 7th of October?
Yeah.
But the fundamental thing is, all this is happening. They all go out. How are we reinforcing ourselves?
That's the question.